All right, we're ready to rock and roll in just a few minutes' time. We have our guest with us, the former Prime Minister of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. He's also former president. He sits in Washington D.C. representing Guyana as the ambassador. Okay, so Mr. Samuel Archibald Hinds is with us, and after we're done with Mr. Hinds, we have former Minister of Health, and he held lots of other positions as well. Worked in international agencies. He was a former CEO of GWI in Guyana. Also, Dr. Richard Van West Charles. He's once again trying to become the leader of the People's National Congress reform. We will be right back with our guest. Please share the link. It's going to be hot.
She put a pot on she hair and gone. Them a the first one out on the dam. Basket on she head, bucket in each hand. Hold up on she frock, I wanna she grandson. To the market, them a go. For the morning, the day is dawning. For cockacrow to give the villagers a warning. Rise and shine, the birds them a sing. All animal take turn as them join in the waking. Cockacrow, dagabag, donkey, bray, horse, and they even duck a quack. Cockacrow, dagabag, donkey, bray, horse, and they even duck a quack. Come and hear this sweet story that tell the people about life in the country. All day a back down, me now a come home. The naga jackass yard for fetch the load. Cockle shy hand, bag over shoulder, running by his side, a Rexy and Rover. From the farm, them a come. Sun a go down but up the river. Some washing clothes, some folks are bathing at the water. Fisherman, they catch them a bring. From a canoe boat, man, them start offloading. Aymara, Kwakwari, Hail Baka Kuma Kuma, even Lokonani. Aymara, Kwakwari, Hail Baka Kuma Kuma, even Bangameri. Listen to this sweet story that tell the people about life in the country. Them children glad when the weekend come. Out in the yard, them all gather round. Some a play catcher, some making house from straw. Two who come later, a grandma or grandpa. All a sit down just a wait. Moonlight so bright, it's just the right time to listen story or to say a little nursery rhyme. Grandpa voice a echo in the night as he tell the tale. Some picnic are there with fright. Oh, Ligan, Mungeza, Massa Kurma Nancy, even Watamuma. Oh, Ligan, Mungeza, Massa Kurma Nancy, even Watamuma. Yeah, man, that's the true story that tell the people about life in the country, life in the country.
That little ditty we used to torment our teachers with when we were kids goes something like this. Onward, upward, Mary had a go. Day by day she tied it to a rope, till at length they got bust the rope, and Miss Mary had to run behind it. We had a lot of fun with that, but Do you actually know how beautiful these words are? Here's the Song of Guyana's Children by W. Hawley Bryant. Born in the land of the mighty Roraima, land of great rivers and far-stretching sea, so like the mountains, the sea, and the river, great, wide, and deep in our lives would we be. Onward, upward, may we ever go, day by day in strength and beauty grow, till at length we each of us may show what Guyana sons and daughters can be. Born in the land of Kaijur, shining splendor, land of the palm tree, the croton, and
if you are looking to have your statutory declaration, affidavit of income, identity, damage or lost passport, lost license, tenancy agreement, agreement of settlement, power of attorney, last will and testament, and certification of documents, then you need to visit the Alistair Collins firm, located at the Killian Mall, 162 Lamaha Street in Georgetown, between Camp and Waterloo Street. Alistair Collins is a commissioner of oaths and a justice of the peace. Make certain you visit him or call for more information at 649-6410 or 685-6448 or 503-1451. And there's adequate parking available. Go down to the Alistair Collins firm and have all of your legal issues settled and brought to the fore. Alistair Collins Firm. Contact them at Alistair Collins Firm.
All right. Hey, guess what? We're going to rock and roll this evening. In fact, we have a packed program. It's 5 minutes after 9 o'clock in beautiful Guyana. And here's where we start by asking you to share the link, because we have like I've said, an interesting program this evening. We have two gentlemen on right after each other. They're not going to be on together because we are going to avoid some sort of political fighting and chair throwing and so forth. And so I don't know whether it would reach to that. I doubt that. They are two mature individuals, but we will deal with Samuel Archibald Hinds, the former prime minister, former president. He now sits in Washington, D.C. as the ambassador representing Guyana. All of you there. There are some things we want to find out from Mr. Samuel Hinds and so forth, but let me see what's happening. Hey, that right on top, our operator Lemon has started right there. Andrew Supermarket. I'm not sure if Lemon goes down there and shop, but if he does, maybe all of you guys should go there as well. So good evening to all of you. We're going to rock and roll. Let's just let's see what's going on with you guys for a quick minute. Vidna. Good evening to you. How are you doing? We have lots of folks. The regular Miss October. How are you doing? Let me see. Samantha Parker. Everyone is on with us. Do share the link so that we can begin with these gentlemen, so that we can rock and roll with these gentlemen right here this evening. I know a lot of you guys are sitting with your popcorns or whatever you're sitting, eating maybe a fudge, maybe some plantain chips or whatever to enjoy the moment. But apart from enjoying the moment, we want you guys, all of you guys, we want you all to be able to get a better understanding of Guyana, of the politics. And you know, we don't beat around the bush at all. That is what we want you to get, all of you. So I've asked our operator, Rochelle Johnson, and all you guys, and Precious Mineral. Good to see you back, Precious Mineral. Do share the link so that we can rock and roll this evening on 107 FM. And those of you who are listening to 107.1 FM on the ground, meaning via your radio, whether you're in your cars or wherever you are, good evening to all of you. Nadia Damet, you said Parsad. We know it also on the quarantine as Mahambug, right? All right. So Troy Daniels and all you guys, good evening. All right. So guess what? We are going to get ready to rock and roll. I am told by our operator. Yes, I am told by our operator that Mr. Samuel Hinds is already with us. So let us get ready to bring Mr. Samuel Hinds on and rock and roll with tonight's program. Begin. First of all, good night, sir.
Good night, Mark. It's good to be with you again. I remember when you worked with the office of Mayor Dinkins in New York, and you quite nicely, graciously arranged a meeting for me, with me and him. That was quite nice of you, sir. And I'm pleased to be on the program this evening because I think I would like the opportunity to speak with the kind of audience that you have, the kind of audience that has been told that the PPP is no good for them. The PPP is a coolie party, don't look after Black people. I want to talk to those people.
Oh, yes, and we want you to talk to those people indeed, because in order to talk to them, we may have to do a lot of talking indeed. And so let's begin.
I've written some things during this month, during this year. One of them being that the leader, I know there was some discussion about what the leader of the PNCR should do. I think Mr. Henry Jeffrey wrote something, and I replied, he talked about whether you're going to have a maximum leader, follow the leader, or what. The important thing for the PNCR and its supporters is for us Afro-Guyanese to free ourselves of those years of rigged elections, put them behind us, and let us go forward. And it's important as we get going in becoming an important producer of petroleum, we need to free ourselves and participate with others in Guyana and around the world. We got to get those the problems off our shoulders.
Oh, we got to get a lot of things off our shoulders indeed. Mr. Samuel Hinds, the man probably most fortunate in Guyana. He's prime minister for the longest while. He's president, and now he sits in Washington, D.C. as the country's ambassador. Let me begin with, first of all, because I got some questions for you, and I need for you to explain. You did say in the beginning to clear some perception that the PPP is an Indian party and all these different things. I think people perceive it even more than just that. But let me begin by asking you, you have been sitting in Washington as Guyana's ambassador. May you explain to our listeners exactly what are some of the things that you have done since you've been there on behalf of all Guyanese?
Well, the letter of appointment reads this way, that the president of Guyana sends his good man, Mr. Sam Hinds, to his friend, the president of USA, to represent him to the president of USA and for the USA president, and to represent the USA president to him. So I work for the president of Guyana, and I work for him without any hesitation because I know that he's working for the good of all the people of Guyana. So that's what I've been doing, working for the president of Guyana.
So you sit there to represent Mr. Irfan Ali, but let me ask you this. And let's begin with the controversial thing, since you came right out of the paddock, so to speak, and you started right off trying to clear the air on some things. How do you feel, though, as you sit there as the country's ambassador, knowing that there are lots of question marks hanging over the person's head that you represent and, quote unquote, the government of Guyana? How do you feel hearing the allegations that your government is an installed government, albeit under questionable circumstances?
Mark, haven't you seen, and I'm sure many of your audience would have seen, or you should show them, the reports that were led by Mr. Golding former Prime Minister of Jamaica, who was heading the OAS team. You can also go to the words of now deceased former Prime Minister of Barbados, Owen Arthur, who represented the Commonwealth, and you can go to all of those reports. And more than that, you can look and see how Mr. Mingo behaved during that time. And you come right to the heart of what has been a problem for me since maybe 1968. We have to, Afro-Guyanese are being asked to, maybe being demanded to look at these things and say that they are fair and they are right, or this and this didn't happen, when it's obvious and in front of you that it has happened. And let me tell you, that psychologically is a great hold on us. I have always been worried by one of the anecdotes that were around in the 70s. The story went this way, that a black woman in the street with nothing, maybe even a lady of the street, and she saw Forbes Burnham and she said, "Mr. Burnham, I got nothing, give me something now. I vote 7 times for you at the last election." And he said, "Woman, if you voted 7 times, you broke the law. Get thee far from me." That was one of the anecdotes going around in black circles, and it showed the big psychological problem that we've been having ever since.
Let me say to you, without getting into the one second, sir. Without getting into the psychological problem and all these sort of things, we are not going through that process or that therapy session. The simple question, because I've heard persons complain about the PPP that they have voted several times to, and Abinagya not do road lights and so forth. But my question is, and of course you mentioned what Mr. Bruce Golding said and what the late the late Prime Minister, Mr. Owen Arthur of Barbados said. But people, 1 second, please. I have your mic on mute because of the echo, Mr. Hinds, because of the echo. Now, with all due respect, people are not looking at what Mr. Bruce Golding, who was called a sanctimonious gangster and a pathological liar by senior persons in Jamaica. People are not looking at that. People are not looking at the fact that Mr. Owen Arthur, a good friend of mine who is now deceased, couldn't win another term in his office in his country. What people are looking at is what came out of the recount process that showed that the PPP, sorry about that, that proved that the PPP did something questionable. Go ahead, sir.
Questionable about this elections in 2020? Man, Mark, I cannot, I don't know how I can respond to that. Everyone saw what Mingo was doing. Everyone followed.
Let me ask you this. What exactly was Mr. Mingo doing? One second. One second, Mr. Hinds. One second, please, sir. What exactly was Mr. Mingo doing? Go ahead.
Yes. Mr. Mingo was kerfuffling the results. He was kerfuffling the counts. He was kerfuffling the counts, trying to kerfuffle the counts. That is what he was doing. And it was plain and visible and in front of all Guyanese and also in front of the world. And it brought great embarrassment to, I hope, the majority of Afro-Guyanese were greatly embarrassed. I do.
But the majority of Afro-Guyanese and the majority of sane Guyanese would not accept your narrative that he was kerfuffling. Would you say that when Mr. Basil Williams and Ms. Amna Ali arrived somewhere on the East Coast that Mr. Anil Nandalal was kerfuffling too? Would you say that?
What are you talking about?
I'm talking about when they heard that ID cards were being given out to people to vote multiple times. Allegation.
Many times. It was so. It was not so.
Okay, so you want to say that what Mr. Anil Nandalal was accused of doing, was not so. But yes, you want to accept that what the allegations are about Mr. Mingo is true. Explain.
Yes.
Explain.
Yes. Because that was visible to many, many people who are not of the PPP, who would say what he was doing was trying to kerfuffle the votes and the count of the votes. And you know that too, man. You know what? One of the things that's come back to my mind, I had a meeting with Walter Rodney and held in Linden. And then many of the supporters of the PNC, mainly women, Afro women, and they came along and they did the usual thing, throw the frock up in the end of the frock up in the air and thing. And he said, pity them. Don't get angry with them. Don't despise them. They are our mothers, our sisters, or daughters. But look what they're doing. They're shouting, we never had it so good. And he said, and for all you know, they didn't have much more than water to put in their pots this morning. And that is what the blacks in Guyana have been condemned to since 1968. Before 1968, Afro-Guyanese prided themselves in being good Christians, honest people with the highest of integrity. And after the 1968 elections, they had to more or less keep their tail between their legs. Or and they got very aggressive to hide their embarrassment. That is what we've been suffering from. That is what has been holding back Afro-Guyanese.
All right. One second.
Holding us back.
1 second. I'll mute your mic because of the echo, not because I'm muting you. But let me say this to you, Mr. Hinds. A lot of our listeners are young people. They weren't born in 1968, I wasn't even born then. I don't want to hear what happened then. But my parents can talk about the beautiful times, especially in Linden, on the quarantine and so forth, when the bauxite industry and everything was kicking. Let us stick to modern times, please. But before we get to modern times, 1 second, before we get to modern times, I want to take you back. I want to take you back to, I want to take you back to 10 years ago or 11 years ago, right? 11 years ago, you said this. This is what you said.
To some extent, too, let me make this point. We have been all, and it's obvious, the overlap with race in our different parties. But I have always had the view and could see that there is more than that. Beyond that, typically, we in the People's Progressive Party, we have more of the attitudes of, there's the stories about the country mouse and the city mouse. We have the attitudes and the sentiments of the country people, and to some extent the PNC has the attitudes and sentiments of city people. One of the things that we tend to accept maybe the issue of discipline in terms of financial disciplines and certain things much more. Maybe we're not as
All right. In that interview, I hope you heard, you were basically saying country mouse and tongue mouse, and that the PNC is described as tongue mouse. In other words, you were giving this impression that tongue people are basically lazy and country people, of which you...
That's not the impression I'm giving.
What impression you're giving?
What I wanted to point out is that if you look at the map of the votes of Democrats and Republicans in the US, you would see that the Democrats are along the coastal areas, the high density city areas. Republicans are more in the hinterland, less dense areas. If you look at the maps for the UK, you would see much the same thing between the Conservatives and the Labour. Conservatives in the thinner country areas, Labour in the urban towns on the coast and ports. And I'm saying that is a standard way or a very common way that people associate themselves in political parties. And that the urban Georgetown people associate, largely the urban Georgetown people in the 50s and 60s, more largely Afro-Guyanese, associated in a group that became the PNC, and the Indo-Guyanese were in the left back in the old PPP after the PNC came out of it. So I was showing, my point is that the challenges we've had in Guyana have been much greater than we recognize, because in all countries in the world, when political parties are formed, they form along lines of race or religion or urban rural. And in Guyana, we tended to have an overlap of all three. So
And that was your explanation.
In my view, much more challenging. Also, we have been underestimating the challenge in developing our country physically and materially.
Well, you know what, Mr. Hinds?
Yes,
in that particular statement, that's not what you were referring to.
No,
but I don't get into that. You were talking about job and value. Yeah,
that's all how I always speak and say.
Let me say this, Joe. Let's get back to your allegation that, and I'll, sorry, mute your mic because of that echo. Let's get back to the allegations that Mr. Mingo, what? Say the word again for us, please. I don't want to sound like Mr. Ali.
I would say he was kerfuffling.
Kerfuffling, right? Okay, he was kerfuffling. Would you say that in the 2006 elections, that Mr. Gokul Budu, this guy here, who was the chief elections officer, would you say that he kerfuffled and caused you to illegally squat on a Region 10 seat for 5 years?
No, I would say that there have been allegations that he has done some things, and I've heard the allegations. I know it went into the court. I think that if things had gone differently, I would have still been in Parliament. I would have still been Prime Minister. We would have had the same number of seats, but the way the seats were distributed would have been different. I know there's some argument that a box was missed or a box was purposely left out in Region 10, and that would have given the AFC another 23 votes or something, and they would have won Region 10. But then if you go through the way the seats are allocated, they would have gotten a regional seat, but they would have gotten one less top-up seat, and we would have gotten one more top-up seat.
But let me say this: the facts and the evidence, the facts and the evidence that came out of GCOM itself after Mr. Kerfuffle, Gokul Budu, was actually caught, right? And the evidence was there that based on the tabulation, it was submitted to show that you and the PPP got more seats than the AFC. But after Mr. Kerfuffle, Gokul Budu was caught, it showed otherwise, that the PPP had won after all of the legal votes were tabulated. Now, you don't want to, would you place Mr. Gokul Budu in the same boat of allegations against Mr. Mingo?
Maybe it has to be investigated. Maybe it has to be investigated. Maybe it has to be investigated.
So let me ask you this, before we move on from that, Mr. Samuel Hinds, and I appreciate your honesty. Would you say that in retrospect, that the fact that you sat in that seat for 5 years, that it actually belonged to the AFC and you squatted in that seat? Be honest.
There are different questions you may be asking. Legally, it was quite proper. Legally, it was quite proper.
No, but the court ruled that it wasn't proper.
When the court ruled that?
Wasn't there an elections petition that heard about 2 years after?
I can't recall that.
And even Mr. Gokul Budu admitted that the tabulation, after he was caught with his pants down, he admitted that the tabulation was wrong, but take it to an election petition. I mean, come on, you have a conscience, don't you?
Well,
you would still be in that seat.
One has to look at those things in much greater detail than I have done, or than the audience. Let the audience bring up more of the details.
Okay, let me ask you. Okay, I got you. I think we got your point, Mr. Samuel Hinds. But I don't. The purpose of having you here is not to make you uncomfortable. I've interviewed you many a times. So don't feel uncomfortable. But I was just responding to allegations leveled against Mr. Mingo compared to allegations and proven facts and evidence against Mr. Gokul Budu, who is now submitted an application to become the chief elections officer again.
Maybe that's why I said, let us have an investigation, a review of what happened there.
What happened there? What happened there where?
So that,
don't you want an investigation and a review for Mr. Mingo as well?
well, I think that is what is happening. That is what is happening. Yes, that is what is happening.
But did you call for an investigation and review against Mr. Gokul Budu?
I think that the circumstances are so very different. The circumstances are so very different.
Let's move on. Our listeners are very smart. Talking about elections again, let's go to 2011. The same guy, Mr. Gokul Budu, awarded the PPP the majority. They won, according to the GCOM, the 2011 elections. They won it. The PPP won. You guys won. However, the same Mr. Gokul Budu attempted, or he actually did until he was caught, give the PPP a majority. But he was caught and had to reverse that to give the PPP a one-seat minority. Allegations that were never called upon to be investigated.
He may not be a good candidate to be chair or to be a chief elections officer or something like that. Let's look at it. Let's look at it. We don't want to go forward with any question mark. We don't want to go forward with any question mark.
You know what? I thank you so much for your honesty to say that about Mr. Gokul Budu.
I didn't say anything about Mr. Gokul. I said, let us investigate it.
No. You did say that there's a possibility that he's not a good candidate.
Any question marks?
Should you think the public would trust somebody like Mr. Gokul sitting there with the question mark?
That's what I'm saying. Maybe that's why from the very beginning I said, let us investigate it. Because I know that he is a candidate, and I think the worst thing to happen for us in Guyana is to go forward to appoint somebody who is very questionable. I would agree with that.
All right, fair enough. We're getting somewhere 9:30. Mark Benchap here. Let's take one more question about GCOM. One more question, because it's a key place. How do you feel about an individual who has been charged, of course exonerated, I believe, but charged and admitted that he got hundreds of millions of dollars in his bank account by selling calling cards? Mr. Omar Sharif has also applied to become chief executive or chief elections officer. How do you feel about that?
To the extent that, as you have said it, that should be taken against him. I very much want that any group that is sitting to compare them would take those things into account. I would very much want that. And I'm sure my party would very much want that.
Your party may very much want that. You may very much want that. Again, I appreciate your honesty. You love to talk about the affairs of African Guyanese. I prefer to be politically correct, not necessarily to say Black Guyanese, but African Guyanese. Were you just sit down with your grandkids? And I hope they're doing okay, your grandson. I have met him a couple of times. And he were to ask you a question, Grandpa, what would be your legacy for not just Guyana, but for region number 10, a region that rescued you when you walked all the way from Maikoni?
How about walking from 54, 58? Where you came from? On the quarantine. But anyhow, sir, yeah. My legacy, I look at my legacy as a legacy to Guyana, and I can feel proud of it. I also look at my legacy to Region 10 and the Bauxite and Alumina Company, and I feel very, very proud of it. And most of all, though, I think we should start thinking of ourselves as being good humans, good members of the human race. I have no problem with my legacy.
So can you name 2 things, though, that you believe you did for the people of Linden? Even even or Region 10, sorry, even whilst you were squatting in that seat for 5 years?
Chief, I did, first of all, we did things for the good of Guyana. When we sit down at the cabinet of the people of Guyana, we work for the people of Guyana, and the people of Linden have been very much people of Guyana and have been in our thoughts. But if you want me to tell you one thing I did, is that when Omai took over the bauxite company and everything was running well, and then when they said at one time out of the blue almost that ran into trouble, we got to close for 2 months. President at the time, Mr. Jack Dio, had no hesitation. He said, we're going to carry people for a minimum time, 40 hours a week. And more than that, we're going to pay them, but to receive the pay, they have to go to, I think, 5 hours a week of computer training and participation in computer. So that was something that was done out of our concern, out of our awareness that the people in Linden are 100% Guyanese like anybody else. You know, the amount of money that we spent maintaining the bauxite company, when we got into government and met a covenant between the outgoing PNC and the World Bank, IMF, that if the managers, the international managers declared that they didn't see a way to become profitable, it was to be closed down immediately and not one more cent thrown behind it. And you know what? When Minprac declared that they couldn't see a way to become profitable, we kept it going. And we had to do, usually you work with people, you had to find ways to finance, to keep the bauxite going. Some under the table, maybe some above the table, maybe get money out of GGMCs, so on and so on. You had to do things to keep it going, and we kept it going. We kept it going.
You're talking about the same. You're talking about the same Omai that you guys gave it away, the bauxite industry for $1 million, that sold it to bauxite for $30 million.
Sold to who?
Is it bauxite?
Well, they would have brought in equipment after they got it for $1 million, comrade. You know, they brought in their equipment that was no longer needed, as Omai had run out of. They had used up all the reserves in Omai, and they brought out the equipment and put it into the company. So it was reasonable for them to sell it at a higher price, and it was for both sides to decide whether it was good enough or not. It was for both sides to decide, and they decided it was so, and it seemed very reasonable to us. But I want to tell you one of the things that I did too. When the both side was coming in, I took the new owners, managers, and we walked the streets of Linden, and I worked at introducing the people. I think Mr. Vibert Mingo, then maybe regional chairman, we held a cocktail party and invited people, brought people around, because the important thing was to generate a relationship, a positive relationship. And in many ways, it has turned out quite right. It has turned out.
In your opinion, quite right. Let's go to your track record and talk a little bit about the unemployment rate in Linden. Whilst you were Prime Minister, let's go 12 years ago or 11 years ago, I interviewed you, and this is what you said.
Trained engineer. I don't know how much you have studied economics, but in a town where the population is about 30,000 persons, right, and the unemployment rate is over 70%, wouldn't you be so brave enough to consider that township a depressed township? Now, let me say this. I've answered this question further. I don't accept the 70% figure. What figure do you accept? I have no figure to put. What I want to say, and I said before, walk Linden, all of Linden, walk all of Kuribaton, walk all of the West Coast Province, walk all of every place, Baltica, and then
Let's stick to Linden, Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. Sam Hinds. I walked all over Linden, all over Kokwani, all over Ituni, Old England, and so forth. And it seemed to me that it was an economically depressed community. The unemployment rate was 70% and higher. Under your regime, can you say what sort of job creation you guys had for the people of Region 10? Because you, apart from Prime Minister, you were sitting there in a seat representing the people of Region 10.
Well, we did a lot in the area of forestry for a start. We got a lot of loggers going. All the small loggers got going over there in that era. I think there were about 4, 5, 6 groups in Linden, in Ituni, in Kokwani. I stopped regularly with the Wilson family in Ituni, and they were making progress in the area of logging. We worked at bringing in agriculture, bringing a new image to agriculture in the area. In particular, we opened up on the West Watuka. We had also, through the IDB, a model farm that was developed. We had at that time pumpkins being exported from Linden to Barbados. So we did many things to get it going. But I tell you what caused troubles for Linden. We also got that call center going. But I tell you what caused troubles for Linden. What caused trouble for Linden is the frequency in which they were told to go and block the bridge. And comrade, I nearly cried at one time because one of the persons working with me, her family has developed, and I saw it develop from 76, the hotel operation, Takatu Hotel in Lethem. And I know that they were planning, I think it was for an Easter event. And then the bridge was blocked. All of those things, people had advanced money, they had made preparations, they couldn't go into to Lethem. They had to dig back in their pockets to refund people. And you know what that was caused by? That was caused by the line from Granger and Rupnarine that they did not agree to the arrangement for a phasing out of electricity subsidies in Linden and investment in productive operations in Linden. Comrades, you know, I have always been very upset by that event. You just imagine and recall that the day before we had agreed to go through the budgets together, even after it was read. And the first day, the PNCR administration, the PNCR opposition, they made representation and say, we know you've raised the old age pension, but we think you should raise it some more. And we said, yes, too, we wanted to raise it even more. But when we look at
Hold a minute.
When we did that on the first day, and it was read, it was accepted, it was carried. When the second day we talked, and we came and I wrote up something by hand and we read it, that we made agreement on this. I took it to Rupnarine and Granger. I made 2 alterations in words. We read it. Nothing happened at the time. But then later on, I heard that between Nagamutu and Ramjatan, phoned up to Linden and told Solomon and whoever else in Linden that Granger and Rupnarine just sold you all out to the PPP. And then they had to, when they called, and we're ready to burn anything, including things green. And that is when happened that Granger and Rupnarine had to run down like
Mr. Hinds.
Position. Look, comrade, if it were that the people told them we don't want to agree with it, they should have been man enough to come back and say we started on this road, but our constituency don't want to do it. We are not going forward until it is resolved.
Well, let me say this to you. Let me say this to you, Mr. Samuel Hinds. Let me say this to you. I'll mute your mic again. That I was there in Parliament. I interviewed Mr. Granger, then opposition leader. I interviewed then Member of Parliament, Ms. Vanessa Kisoon, and others. I also interviewed you. And the facts that you're presenting today or the information presenting as though it is facts is not entirely true. Because during an interview with you, when I called you and I asked you to speak to the people on the bridge, you said you don't care, get them off the bridge. You also spoke about the frequency in which people block the bridge. That's not, other than 2011, when those 3 innocent persons were slaughtered. To this day, you nor the PPP have never apologized to the people of Linden.
Comrade, you know, we had a commission. I think it was an international commission. You've read the report of the commission. You've read that the leadership of the PNC, local and generally, had a lot to carry for it. You read that part? You read that part?
I was in the commission. I was in the commission from start to finish. At the conclusion of the commission, they said that the state, meaning the police, were responsible for those deaths. The state, including the US Prime Minister, never apologized.
Said that the political leaders there were responsible for creating the situation too. They also said that.
I was there in the commission. I never heard that. I never heard that.
Maybe we should go and get. Maybe we should go.
Let us go. I have. Let us go to. And in fact, the commission did say that the police killed those people. So I don't know how you would want to blame the leadership of Region 10 for that.
Creating the confusion, for creating the situation.
No, there was no situation created. It was the police who created that confusion. Mr. Hinds, it was the police who created that confusion.
Let us go back and the commission report.
Okay, right. It was the police. The people understand where you're coming from. But let us go to this here. Sharma Solomon, I want you to listen to him carefully, please, Mr. Hinds.
Hi, good evening, Mark Benchcup. Good evening to your audience. Let me say it's a pleasure to be on your program this evening, but more so, I think it's a good opportunity that you have given not only myself, but the people of Region 10 to be able to respond to our former Prime Minister, now Ambassador, Samuel Hinds. First, before I take this opportunity to get into some of what was discussed, I think it's important that even our former Prime Minister realizes that the opportunity afforded him this evening to be able to express the views on his own behalf and that of his government is one compliments of freedom of expression, which you have allowed for him to be able to share his opinion and views on your program. One would hope that that is translated and transmitted by Sam Hinds to his government, that they're able to appreciate that in the country that he represents as ambassador overseas, that people are not afforded that to express their views and opinions, more so those residents of Region 10 and Linden. And there is where I want to really emphasize, especially of the work done by the then Prime Minister, now Ambassador. One could recall in 2006, Sam Hinds was not only the Prime Minister, but Sam Hinds served as the Member of Parliament, compliments of Gokal Budu, affording him a seat which he was not entitled to, on which years a petition would found should have gone to the AFC. Notwithstanding him having those positions, one cannot see any tangible or anything of substance done by Sam Hinds on behalf of his government towards the people of Region 10 and Linden. And in 2015, in fact, in 2011, this matter was more compounded when Sam Hinds and his government, in the most draconian way, attempted to increase the electricity rates on the people of Region 10, putting further hardship on that community. So I think Sam Hinds is outside of his scope to pronounce on what is right or wrong, and even outside of the moral authority to say how things should or should not be within not only Linden Region 10, but Guyana as a whole. One could recall
we lost him there. Mr. Sharma Solomon, who was then regional chairman for that region when those 3 persons were slaughtered under your prime ministership. What do you have to say, sir?
I said already that you should go, and not only you, but all the audience here should get hold of the report of the Commission of Inquiry and read that report. They should also get, if they can find it, and it may be around, videos of what happened in Parliament when I made the presentation. Maybe when the presentation was made the day before by Ashley, and he said, we've reached agreement to raise the old age pension even further. And I came and I said, we've reached agreement to initiate a program for the phased reduction of the subsidy in Linden. And nothing happened for a couple of hours well. Nothing happened for a couple of hours well.
All right.
The 2 days. You just compare the 2 days and see if you could come up with any answer other than
Mr. Hinds, Mr. Hinds, I have made several calls to your office to have you stop what was happening in Linden by correcting the errors. You have failed to do so. Let's go to this here now. Let's go. One second.
The government is leaning and bending over too much for the industry, which has been described as a failing industry. Why then pump billions of dollars into something that is failing? And the perception there on the streets is basically because it is predominantly Indo-Guyanese that are part of that industry, thus the government wants to go that route. And because Linden now is a predominantly, and the bauxite industry is predominantly Afro-Guyanese, that's why the government wants to punish Lindeners. Why pour billions of dollars into an industry that's failing?
You have to look at the path of the bauxite industry and of the sugar industry. The bauxite industry had significant interventions in 1983 and in 1990. And you may recall that the arrangement was made with MINPROC, the World Bank, the IMF, all those sorts of people. And the position was if MINPROC, in the case of bauxite, MINPROC was to run it for 2 years or so, and then if it could prove that it would be economic, they would privatize it. They would get it privatized, sold off. And if they can't show that it would be economic, it was to be closed by the government. We got that letter from Mr. Maher, the manager, in 1994, that he couldn't see a way to make bauxite economic. And if we followed the rules, we should have shut it down. We didn't follow the rules. We broke the rules and we kept bauxite going, right? In the case of sugar, people argue that we were supposed to privatize it because that has been shown.
People have argued that it should be privatized, sugar as well. You guys have refused to privatize it, but yet continue to pump billions upon billions of dollars in your mic is muted, Mr. Hinds. 1 second. Billions and billions of dollars. The bauxite industry was given over to Rusal, and that company continues to treat the employees as though they're third and fifth class citizens in their own country. Why such special treatment for sugar workers and not bauxite workers?
The bauxite industry wasn't given to Rusal. Rusal came in much later in Berbice. But let me say this, you have to look at the parts of the two companies. The problems with bauxite started much earlier, way back from 76. And as I said there in that piece you had, they had already a World Bank, IMF, and other people intervention in 83 and another one in 89. And it was the outgoing PNC government of that day that made this covenant that we inherited. We inherited the covenant and we didn't follow it. If we disliked black people and disliked bauxite, it would have been the easiest thing to say, close it down. Your PNC people say it should close down. Are we closing it down? That would have been the easiest thing to do politically if we dislike black people, if we dislike bauxite people. On the question of sugar, sugar was on a track which was much later. The problems with sugar were coming in much later than the bauxite. And there were many questions which people recognized at the time, which were not yet resolved with sugar. To privatize sugar at that time, maybe at the end of the 1990s, lots of questions were not yet resolved. I heard discussion of it. I was never a sugar person, but the question of the lands, the sugar lands, whether they were owned by the sugar companies, having used them for many years, or if they were still state-owned and all that sort of thing. There were many questions still.
That was you were talking about 20 odd years ago. What is your take on the continued pooling of billions of dollars? You have said 50 or 12 years ago that it was
That's not me doing. That's not my doing.
Yep. Sorry about that. Sorry about that, sir. Sorry about that, everybody. You have said back then that it was unfair for the PPP to continue to spend billions of dollars, which was just a couple, into the bauxite industry. It was a burden on the taxpayers of Guyana. How do you feel now that people have been saying, experts have been saying that sugar is bitter, the sugar industry have failed under Jack Deere and the PPP, several sugar estates were shut down, but yet billions upon billions of dollars are being pumped into the industry. How do you feel about that, and what do you have to say?
I would say that I have been at the cabinet meetings all through those years, and I am fully with the actions that we took. I'm fully with the actions we took. I'm fully with the judgments we made, the judgment of the new Skeldon plant. I'm fully with the judgment that was made to go ahead with the Skeldon plant. That was recommendation of experts too. So I am with it. I did not sense any questions of different approaches to issues of bauxite and issues of sugar. I did not sense any differences in our approaches to issues of bauxite and issues of sugars.
Would you agree that sugar is dead?
No, I would not agree. I don't think it has to be. I don't think it has to be. I don't think it has to be.
But Europe told us that it's phasing out, and that was over 15 years ago.
Work has been ongoing, and the aim is still to make sugar pay its way.
When?
Well, in good time, I hope. In good time, I hope it will pay its way. I hope it will pay its way.
Over 10 years ago, in an interview with me, you did say that the $2 and $3 billion at that time was under $3 billion given to the to subsidize electricity in Linden.
Yes.
And you were saying that it was burdensome upon taxpayers in the country. But yet that was just a minor fraction, of what is being given to the sugar industry. Would you say that the billions upon billions of taxpayers' money being pumped into the sugar industry is an unfair burden to the taxpayers of Guyana?
I would say that maybe we have to do the balance sheet. Much more, there is the consideration that sugar provided the drainage for the area, and there are lots of things that sugar was intertwined with those areas that we would have to take into consideration. I don't hold the position that we have been in any way partial to sugar compared with bauxite. In fact, I could tell you that I've also heard the complaint at that time when we gave the support to Linden and we required that people to go to the computer classes. I know there was a comment. It might have been a little bit in jest that look what y'all doing. You're pointing them black people in Linden towards the new world and the new economy of computers, but you're still looking to keep us schooly people.
Computer classes? We had the Bench-Up Foundation. We didn't have the billions of dollars. Give computer classes throughout the country. But under Granger's administration, the coalition, they did more than that for sugar workers and everybody throughout the country. Mr. Sam Hinds, Mr. Samuel Archibald Hinds, let us be fair, man. Let us be fair. Now, getting back to sugar. You mentioned the Skeldon estate, and you sat in cabinet and thought that was a good investment. The $200 million for sugar for Skeldon estate. That's a white elephant, and nobody charged.
Yes, it was an investment. The decision to invest was a good decision. It did not work out. You know, in the alumina plant, you might say we have similar things.
Why you didn't? What about the alumina plant? Don't take us back here. Let's stick to sugar. Why didn't it work out? $200 million wasted?
It did work out for a number of reasons, which the experts, not us, not Mr. Jagdeo, which the experts did not anticipate. One of the big things is the difference in the mud and clay that is in Guyana, in the estates.
Y'all didn't do that. Wasn't there a survey done before?
Which I'm told take bacteria into the tanks and they eat up the sugar, which was not a problem in the more sandy areas where the diffusion extraction. One of the main designs there was change in design, was going from squeezing to diffusion extraction.
Yeah, but that you guys, before this project, one second. I just muted you. 1 second, with all due respect. When this project went to cabinet, wasn't there supposed to be a survey done to know that the soil and all the problems you're talking about now?
A lot of things you do. Why do you think people do pilots or they run things? A lot of things you get to grasp the significance when the run is made. You get to grasp the significance.
Hundreds of millions of dollars spent.
The recommendation project experts was, this is the way to go. This is the way for the future. This is the way for the future. I could tell you about similar things in the alumina operation. Alumina plants all had long rotary kilns, which were very costly, used a lot of oil. And then there was a change over. Nowadays, all alumina is calcined in fluid bed calciners. But the first sets of fluid bed calciners had problems, including the ones that we had. They didn't work.
All right. Okay. We got you. It didn't work. Let me ask you this, Mr. Samuel Hinds, and I know you're enjoying the weather in beautiful Washington, D.C.
Yes, sir. Not as cold as where you are.
Oh, yeah. But let me ask you this. Recently, Mr. Jagdeo went to on the quarantine right there at Skeldon, and he announced that sugar workers will have, those who would have already been given a severance, their severance package. He announced that they're going to be given an extra $250,000. What is your take on that? Especially when Guy mine pensioners have not received anything close to that sort of preferential treatment? Your take, sir.
My take, it was a way to recover the situation.
What situation?
A way to recover the situation.
What situation?
The situation of the communities, the individual families that were laid off, and the manner in which they were laid off.
They got their severances. They got everything.
They had many problems and delays and uncertainties in obtaining their termination benefits, and those areas were depressed. It was a legitimate way, and I think a way to restart those areas. It was a way to recover and restart those areas. And in terms of
many years ago, you said you don't want to use it. Linden is not depressed. Linden is not depressed. But you're saying Skeldon, you find reasons to justify those areas to now say that they're depressed. But Linden and other areas are not depressed. Oh, Mr. Hinds. Pardon me?
One can always be selective and prove any case that he wants to prove.
I hear you, Mr. Arjipal.
One can always be selective and prove any case that he wants.
I got your point, and now we understand why. 1 hour I've spent with you. 1 hour. And I've been interviewing you for donkey years now. But let me ask you this before we go. What would you say, especially with the evidence, not perception now, the evidence that Afro-Guyanese are being persecuted, they're being ill-treated, they're being marginalized at every level under the PPP administration? Of course, I don't expect you to say yes. You're not shaking your head, but go ahead.
You just look back in your minds at the south area of Georgetown, which is associated with Afro-Guyanese and pro-PNC. You look at them in 92, and you look at them at the end of our period there in 2015. Nearly everybody enjoyed
barrels
that we had.
A lot of their families from overseas started
vehicles way up, many more buildings painted, and so on. So I totally
you're taking credit for that?
I totally reject those allegations.
You want to give the PPP credit for families overseas doing up their properties?
Afro-Guyanese who are suffering are the ones that are still behaving in the way those behaved in front of Walter Rodney.
How they behaved in front of Walter Rodney? Is it the same way? Is it the same way? One second.
And take benefit of the opportunities that are available.
All right.
And that is my
one second. I want you to get my point. I'll just mute you for a quick second. You're talking about how African Guyanese behave. Did you see how Mr. Irfan Ali behaved and those other individuals in front of Pegasus when they were behaving worse than thugs? Come on, Mr. Hinds.
When was this, sir? When was this? When was this? What are you talking about?
Where's our operator? Like he's fast asleep. Where is Lemon? When Mr. Irfan Ali was shaking up the car and misbehaving and all these sort of things, you missed that.
What was the situation? What was the occasion?
What's your closing remarks before we go?
Well, my closing remarks is that I'm very concerned that the narrative that has been put into the heads of generations of Guyanese, that the problem is the PPP, Indian people, and the PPP and Chedi Jagan, and maybe even Sam Hinds, and that is my big concern. I want them to open their minds and take advantage of the many opportunities that are coming our way, our Guyanese way, and our Afro-Guyanese, Indo-Guyanese, Amerindian Guyanese, Portuguese Guyanese, every Guyanese way. That's what I want. That's what I want. That's what I work for. That's what I write about. That's what I write about.
You know what? I'm drinking a Coke. Let's cheers to something, man. Let's cheers to something. Speaking of cheers,
Cheers.
Something, a little bit of humor. And I can't have you go without not asking you this year. Tell me that it was a joke that one of your security accidentally put some kerosene. What was that whole thing? Explain it to us before you go. Is it true?
Here it is. Here it is. Yeah, joke go back to something other thing that was fabricated.
Well, I just asked you. I said, cheers.
It was at a wedding of what's his name there, Eddie De Silva Rosa, and they had brought in some coconut water. I took a sip of one and I put it aside. Vic and Snally was next to me. About a week later, the security people, I don't know how and who and what, started an investigation why I put aside the thing, why I put it aside. And it was totally, I guess, fabricated or whatever happened there. But they started up about a week after. Somebody must have seen a great opportunity to spin something. But I'm here, you know. I'm still here.
I'm still here. Before we go, Mr. Hinds, as we speak, there's a young man in Russia, a Guyanese, of course, dual citizenship, by the name of Sean Pike, is sitting in a Russian jail right now. What is it that your regime is doing to assist that young man to be free?
Well, one has to know what he's there for.
Have you found out
what he's there for?
Did you do your research?
One has to know what he's there for. Yes.
Do you know what he's there for?
Yes, you did call me on it. I did ask the Foreign Affairs, and they said it had come to their attention, and they were in discussions with the Russian embassy in Guyana.
Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Archibald. Samuel
Yes,
Archibald Hinds, a man originally from Maikoni.
Yes, sir. And I want my fellow Afro-Guyanese to get down to the wheel. You know, this oil that we have found, basically for all of us Guyanese, it's taken away the cloak that we had, that we didn't have money, we couldn't do this, we couldn't do that. The cloak is gone. We have to educate ourselves, we have to get to work, we have to work with others. We have to make ourselves now. We have to make ourselves. And we can. And
Just like the Marriott Hotel. Just like the Marriott Hotel. Just like the Marriott Hotel when you guys agreed for all the employees to be of Chinese nationals and nothing for Guyanese.
Where is this? Where is this?
The Marriott Hotel.
Have you checked out what is the situation of the Pegasus? And
I'm speaking about the Marriott. Pegasus Hotel is a private. It's a private establishment. Private.
I hear you. It's a private. They can do.
But Marriott, taxpayers' money. No Guyanese employees. Were you comfortable with that?
I don't know that there were no Guyanese employees. What I can tell you is that there were Trinidadian employees. In fact, some Guyanese in Trinidad came and told me that we did the foundation work for that hotel.
Let me take you back to what you said. One second.
Let's start off with this controversy surrounding the Marriott Hotel project. We're going to get on later on whether it's good for Guyana or not, from your perspective. But why do you suppose that this entire deal saw the exclusion of Guyanese workers?
I think you mean the team that is working more or less to assemble the hotel itself there. And that team, we accepted to have the Chinese contractor bring that team of about 100 persons, because it is a team that has been working in similar jobs together. And the Chinese contractor had pointed out in our discussions to try to control costs and limit the total investments. He had pointed out that he was willing to have some reduction in his costs.
Mr. Hinds, I've got to go. We have Dr. Richard Van West Charles, as I remember all those days.
Yes,
Marriott,
sir.
all
Yes,
of the
sir.
employees,
Yes, sir.
non-Guyanese.
If you check in any place in the world, you start off creeping and crawling and working, and then in 10 years' time, for all you know, maybe we Guyanese would be doing the construction for the Chinese in China, for all you know.
But at the expense of Guyanese right now. I got you. Thank you so much for your time. Give my regards to your family, sir.
Okay, then. Thank you very much.
All the best to
you. All the
Bye-bye.
best.
Yeah. I don't know what else I should do. It's 13 minutes after. 30. Let me check at some of your comments. Sorry that I had to do all of that in front of you guys. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. But I'm glad that Mr. Samuel Hinds was able to come. And of course, it wasn't going to be any babysitting kind of interview. He expected the tough questions. It wasn't going to be an easy walkover. But I hope he comes again. I hope he comes again. I hope he comes again. What should I do? I've had my other guest, Dr. Richard Van West Charles, on for over an hour. Mr. Hinds should have been just half an hour. Should I bring Dr. Richard Van West Charles on now, or should I leave him for tomorrow or Friday? You guys tell me whether you want. I see some folks are already saying, bring him on, bring him on, bring him on, bring him on. I guess they want Dr. Richard Van West Charles on. Somebody said tomorrow. Somebody says now. Somebody said for about half hour. They want to bring him on now. Bring him on now. Let's bring him on then. Let's go. Dr. Charles, good evening to you.
Hi, Mark. Good evening. Good evening to your viewers.
Thank you for changing things around. Thank you for changing things around.
Part of the job.
Thank you. I see things are split, but most people say bring him on now. They want to hear from you now. So we have you on right now. Right now. How have you been, though?
Pardon me?
How have you been?
A bit busy in the field, working, doing interviews, touching base with groups.
Touching base. And how is your campaign coming along? Is it heating up? Getting somewhere?
Yes, picking up, getting going. I'm heading into Essequibo on the weekend.
Let's begin right away. People are sitting on the fence. Some people are not. Some people are in Congress there. They are prepared to vote for a leader, whichever candidate. There are three of you guys that we know are officially out there. But talk directly to our people. Those who have that voting card, that membership card to go out and vote on the day of elections, Congress election there at Congress Place and wherever else they can vote. Why should people vote for Dr. Richard Van West Charles?
Well, I think we want to ensure that the party is at a different level than where we are at the moment. I think the party has to be reorganized, re-engineered, so that it can provide the leadership at all levels, at the level of the community, at the level of the region, and nationally. And it is important that the organization that we have is in a state of readiness to give support to the work in the field. The other thing is why it is important that the PNC be strengthened. Without the PNC, the partnership is weak. Without the PNC, the coalition is weak. And so part of what we are witnessing has to do with our organization. And therefore, that has to be strengthened. It has to, our relationship with, in terms of the foreign policy, our relationship with the diaspora. So when you look at our groups, we need to have a more effective system which would allow the groups to provide the leadership at the local level. Now, the other thing is, when you look at all of our councillors at the level of the NDC, RDC, and the parliamentarians, they entered the positions not being in a state of readiness, not understanding the functions. And so you need an organization that is consistently preparing its membership for its role of representation, because we have to take that seriously. When we assign people to sit on boards, although right at this present time, many of the boards have no opposition representation, which is a tragedy. But the people that sit on boards must be oriented. The people that are in the NDCs must know their functions. And so the party has to be in a state of readiness. The other issue is the party has to have financial sustainability to do political work. And so, among other things, I have the experience. I bring it coupled with whoever else is going to be elected to be able to change a culture. We have to ensure that people's voices are heard. It's a culture that we can consult with different people. It's a culture that can deal with difference very easily and not allow us to move into a state where we are unable to discuss things in a frank manner. That is important, because when you look at what has happened in Europe and North America, the driver for development is knowledge. And if we have a culture and an environment that clamps down exchange, clamps down criticism, and does not encourage consultation, we cannot function effectively in the 21st century.
All right, well said, Mr. Dr. Van West Charles. He is in the race. Do you see yourself as a long shot or getting a good shot at this victory?
A good shot, because remember, the members of the party have got to decide who is a delegate coming to the Congress. So once one has access to the membership to provide your vision, I believe I have the capacity to explain that vision. In terms of a number of other things which I wish to propose. You know, I believe there's a new leadership model of term limits for the leader, term limits for the members of central exec, code of ethics, a code of conduct, and accountability of the membership at all levels.
All right. I know folks are a bit tired. I never expected to have you on this long. You're always welcome here at any time in terms of getting your message out. But I still have a couple more questions for you. This is not your first time running for the leadership of the party. It's probably your second time?
No, this is the first time.
For the first time?
When I returned in 2000, 10, 11, I was working across the country, but I stepped back at that point in time and gave way to Winston Murray, who was actually in the country longer at that time and was in the parliament. And we met at OMG, himself, Jeffrey Thomas, and myself, and I agreed that he will go forward. On the second occasion, when I got nominated and I accepted the nomination, somehow the Secretariat did not receive my acceptance, and I gave way to Carl Greenwich. So this is indeed the first time, and I hope that the second time does not repeat itself in the third time.
All right, I got you. I thought maybe you were also one of the campaign manager for Winston Murray.
Well, I was basically number two, and four of us really led the way in terms of the campaign. It was Winston, Jeffrey Thomas, Vincent Alexander, myself, when we had to deal with some critical issues, along with a bigger team. James McAllister, I think Norton was there, not at the beginning, but a bit later.
Well, Mr. Norton said that he was the campaign manager.
Well, that's not my recollection.
Okay, not your recollection at all. How would you answer up to folks who say that you have been out of Guyana for such a long time that you have missed the reality on the ground, and therefore, by virtue of that, you should not even be running for the leadership?
Well, I keep saying to many people that as an international civil servant, I have to come on home leave every year. So I'm always in touch with the country. When there were the floods, I mobilized resources to send home for the floods. I will check on an annual basis when I come home. At that time, I was meeting with President Hoyt, discussing issues, understanding from him how he saw the challenges of the group and what are his intentions. So I was no stranger to the developmental realities over those years. I was in Washington, D.C., and when I was in Barbados, Jeffrey Thomas can speak on this point. I was here every month. At least one weekend a month, I came home. So this issue that I was away all these years, this is a bit of political wickedness on the part of a number of people.
You know, and I'm trying to recall, because I'm getting to be an old man now, and people can raffle me or ruffle my feathers, so to speak, because I've been there. I know who is who. But I recall that when do forgive me, you said you supported his campaign after Mr. Carl Greenwich. Gosh, Mr. Carl Greenwich was away for a long, long time too. And the people who are saying that you have been away for a long, long time too didn't say that to Mr. Carl Greenwich. In fact, they supported Mr. Carl Greenwich. Do you see that sort of hypocrisy?
Well, some people bend the truth, but I'm not worried about that.
All right, glad that you.
I will not be distracted by that.
Glad that you're not worried. Neither are you distracted. But Mr. Norton, on a couple of times, he said that he doesn't have any skeletons in his closets. Of course, referencing to his opponents, throwing some punches at his opponents, that his opponents might have skeletons in their closets, and because of that, the PPP can use those opponents, his opponents, as puppets. How do you respond to that skeleton in closet stuff?
Well, I think if he understands democracy, and a democracy is based on information that would permit voters to have access to analyze and make sensible decisions. If he has information about other candidates, he should reveal same. It's as simple as that, because that's a democratic approach. Because he cannot be making statements and not providing evidence with respect to those statements. Because the delegates who have to exercise the franchise on behalf of their groups, and the groups who have to instruct the delegates, then he should know. And that's a serious statement that is being made. And that's not a statement that should be in a whisper campaign. It should be in terms of transparency. It should be made available to everyone, and the candidates can decide whether or not they want to reply, and the members have an option to listen and make sensible decisions in the interest of the organization.
When you look back, though, Dr. Richard Van Mis Charles, you kind of like jumped on the bus and went over on an excursion, so to speak, a political excursion over to the AFC. So in other words, you had one foot in the PNC, your father-in-law's party, the late President Burnham, one foot in the PNC and one foot in the AFC. How do you explain that to your delegates?
Well, look, I don't understand. For me, it's much ado about nothing, because when you are talking about, and you consider, let's deal with myself, because I am not the only person who left the PNC and came back, and my father-in-law was in the PPP and left and formed his own party. In politics, you have to understand people move based on some realities at the time. If those realities change, then people make decisions. When you make decisions, decision-making is a dynamic process. It's not cast always in stone, except when it's based on scientific evidence, as we know in the real world. What you're looking for at this point in time is the persons who can bring to the table the experience, the know-how, the capacity to be able to turn the organization around, that young people in particular have a comfort level, and that they see something that draws them and makes them relevant to what and it makes the organization relevant to the objectives of the young population. But presently, we are not attracting as many young people as we ought to do, because my own diagnosis is because of the structure, the organization, and some of the historic cultures of the organization. But we are in the 21st century. So we can't be acting the same. We can't be doing the same thing. And here we are in the country, we're talking about constitutional reform because there are different realities occurring and we see things are changing. So likewise, people's attitudes, their behaviors, the structures that we have got to be different in the 21st century. So the organization needs to be re-engineered and shaped differently, especially for the young people, because we have about 65% young people in the country. And therefore, it is their future. But the organization has to welcome them, has to listen to them. They have to be at the table. And we have to look at how because of all the wealth that we're seeing in front of us, how we prepare the road for future generations.
All right, we are looking at the time. We know we've gone way over time. Thanks to our operator Lemon for seeing with us with this. But I've seen some questions where they say that maybe your opponents, without naming any, but your opponents may not have what it takes to, if they were to win the leadership of the party, to get crossover votes from other ethnic groups, young people, and even those sitting on the fence. Do you think you have that?
Of course. Look, a national party in a multi-ethnic country must have the capacity to attract all ethnicities to the party. It is the leadership, the members, that will make that happen. My history is one that I have mixed with all ethnicities. I have worked in many countries with different cultures, etc., and have never had any issues. So working with different ethnicities, different cultures, etc., has never been a problem for me. And therefore, as a matter of fact, my history has been, even within my family, it is so mixed that for all of us, it comes naturally that my identity, the preeminent identity, is Guyanese, not my ethnicity. But I do not say to you that because we are a multi-ethnic country, we must throw away our ethnicity, but we must bring them together to form the amalgam that Fort Burnham speaks of, so that our cultures can be richer in this dear land of ours.
All right, we just got some signals here from our operator, but that's okay. Dr. Van West Charles, I know you have spoken a lot about the COVID-19 pandemic and try to advise citizens throughout Guyana and outside of Guyana. And we thank you so much for that. But let's get back to the Congress. Just a couple more questions and that's it, sir, for tonight. But let us say that on Congress Day, on Elections Day there, the Congress, that it happens so that you don't win. Will you work along with the winner?
Yes, I expect the processes to be democratic. Although I think there's some things which are occurring which I think people should desist from. For example, I do not think it is good for our democracy that the General Secretary should find herself in the launch of one of the candidates or be part of her entourage.
Is it the first time? Is it the first time that has happened?
To my knowledge. And so I don't think that is a good sign, and I would hope that she would desist from doing that as we proceed in the campaign.
All right. With that said, people are looking for a smooth and a transparent process there. Mr. Van West Charles, I know it is getting late, but my apologies, sir. You have much longer time, some other time, very, very soon. And 107.1 FM is open to you and your campaign as well. We give you time during the course of the week to talk about your campaign on your own campaign show, sir. We just wish you and all the other candidates all the best. But before we go, your closing remarks. And again, I apologize for this short and late interview. Your closing remarks.
I understand.
Yes.
And I think you dealt with the former Prime Minister very well. I just want to say that this is an important juncture for our party, especially with the resources that we are about to earn from the exploitation of oil. and to use those resources for the sustainable development of our country, the leadership of Guyana, of the political framework, is critical. The leadership of the PNC is vital. It therefore means that the choices that are in front of us are serious choices, and that we have to bring the experience to the fore, and we have to ensure that we transfer that experience to our younger colleagues. We also have to ensure that the experience, the technical experience of the younger people can bolster what we have to do. And therefore, I will encourage everyone to pay close attention and to see that the People's National Congress reform will be on a path for reconstruction and re-engineering under my leadership. I thank you.
All right, Dr. Richard Van West Charles, I have lots of other questions for you, but I will bring you back soon, maybe early next week. But again, you guys have your own show on 107.1 FM. Let us know when you're ready for that. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you also, Dr. Van West Charles, for your patience. I know you have been around. I know you have contributed. You have worked at PAHO and all these different agencies, foreign agencies representing Guyana very, very well. I do not subscribe to the view that people were away so long and why they should come back now or whatever. I look at competence, and if your policies are good enough and sufficient to sell to the what they call the folks who have to vote on the day of Congress, well, so be it. Let the person who sell his or her product better to those delegates come out victorious. Who knows?
You're so right.
Maybe it's your other opponents. Who know? But were you to be elected leader, what space you have for Aubrey Norton? Just a mischievous question.
Well, let me say to you that, let me say quickly that my history, I believe in working as a team. And it is the democratic expression that throws up the principal officers and the elected members of the Central Exec. And it is has been my experience as I moved from country to country to build the teams so that I can successfully implement programs for the development of those countries I've worked in. So my platform is open to anyone that the delegates would elect. And I will work with anyone. I understand political battles, and I understand sometimes people get carried away. And therefore, those things will not be at the back of my mind. What is at the back of my mind is the growth and development of our country and the performance of our great party as we go forward.
Dr. Richard Van West Charles, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Have a great night. Please give my regards to your wife, Roxanne. God bless her.
Certainly.
God bless.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right. We really got to go because you know who took up a lot of our time. It's okay. We invite people here to talk about the issues, to debate them and so forth. And Mr. Samuel Hinds, whenever he wants to return to talk about something, we are here to talk about something with him or any other person who wants to talk about something. But just be prepared when you come to talk about something or anything whatsoever. Thank you so much, Dr. Richard Van West Charles, and Mr. Samuel Hinds as well, and to all of our listeners, those who stayed with us, Leslyn Isles and all, Raul Blackman and every one of you. I can't call all of your names. Roxanne Bacchus, how are you doing? Yes, you can go and sleep now, Roxanne. Henry Fordyce is saying, what? My view is the candidate with the energy is the winner. You know, this reminds me of being on the quarantine. And J.R. Crawford and all of us, we used to ride donkey and horses and so forth. And usually the horse, J.R. had a horse that used to gallop and go in, run quick, 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 quick. And by the time we reached the reef, coming back down, J.R. and his horse in a corner drinking water and tired, and we just went right past him. Sometimes fancy gallop don't win race. Don't run away with that. And that's why I'm saying the race is not yet over. It's not yet over. I know all of you have your candidates. I haven't chosen one. Maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I just will. I don't know. But fancy gallop don't win race. Fancy gallop don't win race. Mr. Leonard, good evening to you. All right, we've got to go. God bless you, and God bless our beautiful country, Guyana. So long.
That little ditty we used to torment our teachers with when we were kids goes something like this. Onward, upward, Mary had a go. Day by day she tied it to a rope, till at length they got busty rope, and Miss Mary had to run behind it. We had a lot of fun with that, but do you actually know how beautiful these words are? Here's the Song of Guyana's Children by W. Hawley Bryant. Born in the land of the mighty Roraima, land of great rivers and far-stretching sea, so like the mountains, the sea, and the river, great, wide, and deep in our lives would we be. Onward, upward, may we ever go, day by day in strength and beauty grow, till at length we each of us may show what Guyana sons and daughters can be. Born in the land of Kaijur, shining splendor, land of the palm tree, the croton and fern, we would possess all the virtues and graces, we all the glory of goodness would learn.